The knock came at 5:03 a.m. 3 sharp raps that cut through my dream like a blade through silk. I knew it was Mrs. Kovač before I opened the door. She was the only person who knocked with that precise rhythm, learned, she once told me, from decades of working hospital night shifts where every sound had to mean something. "Daniel," she said, and her voice carried a weight that made my blood slow. "Don't go to work today. Trust me." I'd lived next to Mrs. Kovač for 7 years. She'd never asked me for anything. Not when her husband died, not when her daughter stopped visiting, not even when I'd heard her crying through our shared wall at 2 a.m. last Christmas. "What's wrong?" I asked. She looked past me, into my apartment as if checking for something, or someone. "Your coffee maker," she said. "The one you use every morning at 6:15. Don't touch it today." My mouth went dry. How did she know my routine that precisely? "Mrs. Kovač, trust me." Her hand gripped my wrist with surprising strength. "And when they come asking questions, tell them you overslept. Tell them your alarm didn't go off. Tell them anything except the truth." Then she was gone, her apartment door clicking shut with a finality that made me shiver. I stood in my doorway, bare feet on cold tile, heart hammering for reasons I couldn't name. Mrs. Kovač had always been odd, collecting newspapers, feeding exactly 13 cats, humming songs in Croatian while tending her balcony garden full of herbs I couldn't identify. But this was different. This was specific. I went back inside. My roommate's door was still closed. Ethan always slept until 7. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and my own breathing. I stared at the coffee maker sitting on our counter. Ethan had bought it for me 3 months ago, right after he moved in. "Welcome gift," he'd said with that easy smile of his. "I noticed your old one was dying. Figured we could both use decent coffee in the morning." It had seemed thoughtful at the time, sweet even. Ethan was like that, always noticing things, always trying to help. When I'd been stressed about work, he'd made dinner. When I'd had the flu last month, he'd brought me soup and medicine without me even asking. He was the perfect roommate, the kind of guy who made living with someone easy instead of exhausting. So why was I staring at his gift like it was a snake coiled on my counter? I checked the time. 5:47 a.m. 28 minutes until I'd normally press the brew button, then jump in the shower while it made my coffee. The same routine I'd followed every single day for 3 months. The same routine Mrs. Kovač knew by heart. I unplugged the coffee maker and stepped back, feeling paranoid. Ridiculous. But then I noticed something I'd never seen before. The bottom of the water reservoir had a slight discoloration, a faint film that caught the kitchen light. I lifted the reservoir off and held it up to the window as dawn started breaking outside. There, settled in the bottom like a ghost, was a fine white residue. My hands started shaking. I dumped the water reservoir's contents into a jar and sealed it. Then I searched our apartment like a man possessed, moving quietly so I wouldn't wake Ethan. In the bathroom we shared, I found my toothbrush had been replaced. It looked identical to my old one, same brand, same color. But the bristles were slightly different, softer. When had that happened? In the kitchen, I checked the coffee creamer I used every morning. Unopened seal looked intact. But when I held it up to the light, I could see tiny needle marks in the foil top. So small I'd never noticed them before. My vitamins. The bottle Ethan had picked up for me when he went to Costco last week because I'd mentioned I was running low. I opened it. The pills looked right, but something in my gut screamed wrong. I sat on my couch surrounded by evidence of, what? Kindness or something else. That's when I remembered the headaches. They'd started about 6 weeks ago, mild at first. I'd blamed stress, too much screen time, not enough sleep. Then came the fatigue, the brain fog, the weird dreams, the times I'd wake up and not remember going to bed. Last week I'd almost passed out at work. HR had sent me home early, told me I looked grey. I'd laughed it off, said I was probably coming down with something. Ethan had been so concerned, made me soup, insisted I rest, brought me water and medicine throughout the day. Brought me water. My vision tunneled. How many times had Ethan handed me a glass of water and I drunk it without thinking? How many meals had he cooked? How many times had he helped by making my coffee before I woke up? I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and Googled slow poisoning symptoms. The list that came up read like a diary of my last 2 months. Fatigue, confusion, headaches, nausea, memory problems, weakness, dizziness. Oh no. I scrolled further. Heavy metal poisoning, arsenic, antifreeze. Things that accumulated in your system slowly, causing damage that looked like ordinary illness until suddenly it didn't. Until suddenly you were in the hospital, and by then it was too late. My life insurance policy, the one through work. I'd updated it 4 months ago, right before I'd posted looking for a roommate, because rent was killing me. Ethan had been the first person to respond. Perfect timing, great references, stable job, clean background check. He'd moved in within a week. Had he known? Had he been waiting for me to post that roommate ad? I opened my banking app, something I should have done weeks ago. There were charges I didn't recognize, small ones. A medical supply company. A pharmacy 2 towns over. Purchases made on my card while I was at work. My card that I kept in my wallet in my room. My room that Ethan had access to while I slept, while I showered, while I lived my life completely unaware. At 6:15 a.m. exactly, I heard Ethan's door open. I was sitting on the couch in the dark, the coffee maker still unplugged, my phone clutched in my hand. "Hey man, you're up early." His voice was warm, friendly. The same voice that had laughed at my jokes, asked about my day, acted like he actually gave a damn. "Want me to make coffee?" "No," I said. My voice came out steady despite my racing heart. "I'm good." He walked into the kitchen, and I watched him from the shadows of the living room. Watched him notice the unplugged coffee maker, saw him pause, just for a second. "You feeling okay?" he asked, and heaven help me, he sounded genuinely concerned. "You've been sick a lot lately." He glanced at his watch. "But hey, isn't today your big presentation? The one you've been prepping for weeks? Your boss will be furious if you miss it. Here, let me make you some coffee while you shower. You'll feel better once you get some caffeine in you." He was already moving toward the kitchen, toward the coffee maker I'd unplugged, toward the final dose that would finish what he'd started 3 months ago. My blood ran cold. The presentation. He'd been asking about it all week, making sure I hadn't forgotten, making sure I'd be at work today, making sure I'd follow my routine. Mrs. Kovač had said, "Don't go to work." Now I understood why. He needed me there. Needed me to collapse at the office in front of witnesses, far from home where questions might be asked about what I'd eaten or drunk here. "I'm not going in," I said, standing up. "I'm calling in sick." I grabbed my keys and wallet, started moving toward the door. "Daniel." Something in his voice made me stop. "You didn't make your coffee." "Yeah, I know. I just need a change." "You always make your coffee." I turned to look at him. He was standing by the counter, backlit by the kitchen light, and for the first time since he'd moved in, I really looked at him. Early 30s, fit, handsome in a forgettable way, the kind of guy who could blend into any crowd, play any role. His smile was still in place, but his eyes had changed. They were flat now, calculating. "I switched it up today," I said carefully, trying to break my routine. "Why?" The question hung in the air between us like a blade. "Why would you need to break your routine, Daniel?" My hand tightened on my keys. No reason, just felt like it. We stared at each other across the apartment, and I realized with sickening clarity that we were done pretending. He knew that I knew, and I knew that he knew that I knew. The only question was, what happened next? "Mrs. Kovač," he said softly. "She talked to you, didn't she?" My blood turned to ice. "I saw her at your door this morning, 5 a.m. Bit early for a social call." He moved slightly, blocking my path to the exit. "What did she tell you?" "Nothing," I said. She was confused, thought I was someone else. "Daniel," he shook his head, almost sadly. "Don't lie. You're not good at it. That's one of the things I liked about you. You're honest, trusting. You believe the best in people." He took a step closer. "That's why I chose you." Everything in me screamed to run, but my feet felt welded to the floor. Chose me for what? Ethan smiled, and it was the smile I'd seen 100 times, when he'd brought me soup, when he'd laughed at my jokes, when he'd seemed like the answer to my roommate prayers. Do you know how hard it is to find the perfect mark? He asked conversationally. Young enough to have life insurance, but old enough to have built up a decent policy. Living alone, so no one's paying too close attention. Predictable routine. No close family nearby. A job that's stressful enough that sudden health decline makes sense. He leaned against the counter, casual, like we were discussing the weather. You were perfect, and then you made it even easier. You posted looking for a roommate. You invited me in. The insurance, I said numbly. That's what this is about. $250,000. He said it like he was savoring the words. That's what you're worth dead, Daniel. Your mother listed you as the policy manager, and you changed your beneficiary 6 weeks ago to me. Remember, I suggested it one night when we were drinking. Said since we were living together it made sense to look out for each other. You thought it was sweet. I didn't remember that. The memory was there, fuzzy and distant, but it felt wrong. Had I been drugged when I'd signed those papers? You seemed really out of it that night, Ethan continued, reading my face. I might have put something in your beer, just a little something to make you more agreeable. You signed everything I needed, even gave me power of attorney for medical decisions just in case. You're very thorough when you're not quite conscious. Nausea rolled through me. The coffee maker, I said. Antifreeze, he confirmed. Just a little bit every morning, mixed with the arsenic I'd been putting in your vitamins and the thallium in your toothpaste. I like to diversify, makes the symptoms more confusing. Doctors never quite know what they're looking at. He spoke about it like he was describing a recipe. You would have died today, probably. I increased the dosage last night. By tonight you'd have collapsed, maybe at work, maybe at home. Either way, it would have looked like your system just gave out. Young guy, tragic, but these things happen. Undiagnosed heart condition maybe, or a stroke. The medical examiner would have found a dozen things wrong with you, but nothing that screamed murder. Just bad luck. Why are you telling me this? My voice cracked. Because you're not going to work today, are you? You're going to stay home. And without Mrs. Kovač to interrupt us, we're going to have a very bad accident. He pulled something from his pocket, a syringe. This is potassium chloride. It'll stop your heart in minutes, and the best part, it's almost undetectable in an autopsy, especially if your system is already compromised by other toxins. He took another step toward me. The official story will be that you collapsed at home. Your poor roommate tried to save you, called 911, performed CPR, but sadly, you were already gone. I'll be the grieving friend at your funeral. I'll comfort your mother. I'll collect the insurance 6 months from now, and then I'll move on to the next one. Next one? The words escaped before I could stop them. His smile widened. Did you think you were the first? Daniel, I've been doing this for years. You're number 7, and you were going so smoothly until that nosy old woman next door decided to play hero. The way he said it, casual, proud, made my skin crawl. Where is she? I demanded. Who knows? Who cares? He shrugged. She's an old woman who should have minded her own business. Won't matter in a few minutes anyway. She's not here to save you now. He moved fast. One moment he was by the counter, the next he was crossing the living room, syringe raised. I threw my keys at his face and bolted for the door. I got the door open and stumbled into the hallway, my legs weak and uncoordinated. Help! I screamed. Someone help me! Ethan came through the door behind me, fast and silent. I could hear his footsteps, steady and patient. He knew I couldn't run far. He'd made sure of that. I made it 3 steps toward the stairwell when a door opened. Mrs. Kovač stepped into the hallway, all 5 feet of her, holding her wooden walking cane like a weapon. That's far enough, she said calmly. Ethan stopped. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. Get out of the way, old woman. No. She moved to block the hallway, positioning herself between us. Her cane was planted firmly on the floor. Daniel, go to the stairwell. Call 911. I'll handle this. Mrs. Kovač, he has a... I know what he has. Go. Now. Ethan's expression darkened. You're making a mistake. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Don't I? Her voice was steel. I know exactly what you are. I've seen your kind before. My husband died from the same slow poison you've been giving Daniel. Took me 40 years to recognize the pattern, but I learned. She shifted her grip on the cane. I won't let you finish what you started. Ethan lunged. Mrs. Kovač's cane cracked across his wrist with surgical precision. The syringe flew from his hand and skittered across the floor. He grabbed for her, but she was faster than she looked. Decades of hospital shifts had taught her how to move efficiently, how to anticipate violence from patients who'd lost control. The cane came down again, this time across his jaw. I heard the crack from where I stood. "Daniel," she shouted, "the phone!" I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. 911, what's your emergency? There's a man trying to kill me, I gasped. He's been poisoning me for months. He just tried to inject me with something. My neighbor is fighting him off. Please, send help. I gave them the address, barely able to form words. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard Mrs. Kovač's voice, calm and authoritative. Stay down. The police are coming. If you move again, I'll break more than your jaw. Ethan was on the floor, cradling his face, blood seeping between his fingers. 2 minutes later, sirens filled the street outside. At the ER, they drew my blood and found everything Ethan had promised. Antifreeze, arsenic, thallium, potassium levels that were already dangerously high even before the syringe. Another few days, the doctor said quietly, and your organs would have started failing. You're very lucky. Lucky. Right. The police came while I was hooked up to IVs, pumping my system full of fluids and chelating agents to bind the toxins. Detective Park was mid-40s, with tired eyes that had seen too much. He took my statement with the kind of patience that told me he'd done this before. We found everything in your apartment, he said. The poisons, the forged documents, your altered beneficiary forms. He paused, watching my reaction. He's done this 6 times before. You're the first one who lived to tell it. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. 6 other people. 6 families who'd buried loved ones, never knowing they'd been murdered. By noon, sitting in that hospital bed with Detective Park explaining how 6 others had died the same way, I finally understood why Mrs. Kovač had knocked at 5:03 a.m. She hadn't just saved my morning, she'd saved my life. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you to trust your instincts, or pay attention to the people who care enough to warn you, please hit that subscribe button and let me know where you are watching from. What about Mrs. Kovač? I asked Detective Park. For the first time, he smiled. She fractured his jaw in 2 places and broke 3 of his fingers. When we got there, she was sitting on him with her cane across his throat. 74 years old and tougher than most of my officers. Is she okay? She's fine. Giving her statement now. Between you and me, she's been building a file on your roommate for 3 weeks. Photographs, timestamps, observations. Without her documentation, we might not have had enough for an arrest warrant. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. She saved your life, Mr. Reeves, twice. First with the warning, then with that cane. You should thank her when you get the chance. I will, I promised. Mrs. Kovač came to see me later that afternoon. She looked smaller somehow, older, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. She settled into the chair beside my bed with a soft grunt. How did you know? I asked. I knew because I watched, she said simply. I watch everyone in our building. It's what I do. Old woman with nothing but time and cats. She was quiet for a moment, her hands tightening on her cane. My husband, he died slowly. The doctors said it was natural, heart problems, kidney failure. But I knew something was wrong. The way he got sick so suddenly. The way nothing helped. The way his friend from work was always around, always helping, always so concerned. Her voice went soft, distant. By the time I understood, it was too late. No one believed me. An old widow, grieving, looking for someone to blame. That's what they said. I'm sorry, I whispered. Don't be sorry. Be alive. She reached over and patted my hand. I've been watching people for 40 years since then, learning the signs. Most people, they're just people. Good people who genuinely want to help. The world needs more of that kindness, more neighbors who look out for each other. But sometimes someone moves in and the patterns are wrong. Too helpful, too interested, too perfect. You've been watching Ethan since day one. The way he asked questions about you, the way he touched your things when you weren't looking, the way he went into your room. And then you started getting sick. And I knew. Her voice hardened. I knew exactly what he was doing because I'd seen it before. Why didn't you call the police sooner? And tell them what? That I had a feeling? That your roommate was too nice? They would have done nothing. Worse, they would have warned him that someone was watching. She shook her head. I needed proof. I needed you to see it yourself. So I waited until I was certain, until I knew he was going to finish it today. And then I warned you. You saved my life. No. Her eyes met mine, fierce and clear. I gave you a chance to save yourself. You did the rest. You listened when others would have dismissed me. You trusted your instincts. That's what kept you alive. Before she left, she pulled a small potted orchid from her bag, white blooms on delicate stems. Take this, she said. Orchids are survivors. They look fragile, but they're tough. They adapt. They bloom even in the worst conditions. I took it carefully, the pot warm from her hands. Thank you, I said, for everything. She smiled. You're welcome. And Daniel? Trust your instincts from now on. When something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore that feeling just because someone seems nice. But don't become so suspicious that you stop accepting genuine kindness either. Learn to tell the difference. That's the real skill. I won't forget, I promised. Good. Now go. Live your life. Be careful. But don't be afraid. You survived. That matters. It's been 6 months since that morning. I live in Austin now. Alone. No roommates. I probably won't have one ever again. I don't trust easily anymore. I notice things, patterns, inconsistencies, people who are too helpful or too interested. Some people call it paranoia. My therapist calls it hypervigilance. I call it staying alive. But Mrs. Kovač was right. I had to learn not to let fear turn me bitter. The world still has good people in it. People who help because they genuinely care, not because they want something. The trick is learning to tell them apart. The nightmares are getting better. The physical symptoms are mostly gone, though my liver still shows signs of damage. The doctor says I'll need to be careful for the rest of my life. No alcohol, regular monitoring, small price to pay. I keep the orchid Mrs. Kovač gave me on my kitchen counter, right where a coffee maker used to sit. I water it every week. I talk to it sometimes, which probably makes me seem crazy, but it's alive because I take care of it, and I'm alive because someone took care of me, someone who noticed, someone who watched, someone who remembered her own loss and refused to let it happen again. I called Mrs. Kovač last week. She sounded good, happy even. Her daughter has started visiting again, bringing her grandchildren. The cats are thriving. How's the orchid? She asked. Blooming, I told her. Good. That means you're doing well. Orchids only bloom when they feel safe. Maybe that's true. Maybe I'm starting to feel safe again. Or maybe I've just learned that safety isn't about never being afraid. It's about knowing when to listen to the fear and when to trust anyway. Because sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places. Sometimes it comes from an old woman with 13 cats who spent 40 years learning to see what others miss. Sometimes it's as simple as 3 words at 5 a.m. Trust me. And sometimes the difference between life and death is whether you're brave enough to listen. Before you go, I want to leave you with this. In a world that moves so fast, we've stopped paying attention to the small things. The neighbor who watches a little too closely, or the one who cares just enough to notice when something's wrong. We've lost the art of listening to our instincts, of trusting that uncomfortable feeling in our gut. This isn't about living in fear. It's about living aware. It's about honoring the people who care enough to warn us and being brave enough to be one of those people for someone else. If this story touched you, If it made you think twice about the routines you follow without question, then do me a favor. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, pay attention. To your neighbors, to your instincts, to that small voice that says something isn't right. Because somewhere out there, someone might need you to be their Mrs. Kovač, and someday you might need them to be yours. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember, the orchid is blooming.